Okay, welcome everybody. Call to order here for the Issaquah Park Board meeting on August 23rd, 2021. Thank you all for joining us, including a few community members I understand that are out there as well. First thing that I want to do this evening is to take a roll call. So when I call your name, please take yourself off mute if that's necessary, and just acknowledge your attendance. Zach.
Present.
Chris.
Present.
Ruben.
Present.
Jonathan.
Present.
Brenda.
Present.
Thank you. I think that covers everybody that's online here for right this minute. We have a couple people yet, hopefully will join us. Has everybody had an opportunity to review minutes from our last meeting? Any questions, concerns, comments? Seeing anything? Zach, I don't see that you have a camera on, so if you're waving or doing anything, I don't know what that might be. I assume maybe you're on phone. In any event, does anybody have any objections to the approval of minutes? Not seeing any objections, I hereby approve minutes from our last meeting. Thank you, everyone. We have a fairly busy evening tonight with four items on regular business. We're going to have an introduction of a couple new staff members, which we're all excited about to see. And we're going to have a presentation from Minnie regarding Title VIII code update, which is going to take the bulk of what we're going to be dealing with this evening. And a brief presentation on Blackberry Park and a brief presentation on wayfinding. And so with that, I wanted to get started here with public comments. Is there anybody that's made an indication, Melissa, from the community of wanting to make a public comment?
I'm going to unmute each of them so they can inform us if they'd like to. We'll start here with Connie. Do you like to make a comment this evening?
No, it's well, this evening, I don't know. It's unclear as to whether this is my only opportunity or not.
Well, I'll tell you what, Connie, I'll be flexible with you. I don't want to have you be able to make a comment on each of the items, but if there's a specific item that you'd like to talk after the presentation, we can do that. Is there anything?
That would be better because I may not have to say anything.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So,
Yeah,
okay.
who knows?
So, although I don't know that I want to open that up after every one of them, is there a particular item that you would have interest in making a comment?
What if I just send a note to the administrator if I decide I want to have a particular item?
That'll work. Okay.
Okay.
So nothing
Thank
now?
you.
Okay.
No.
Anyone else?
One moment. Okay, Julian, you are unmuted and I saw your hand raised, so please go ahead with your comment.
I just wanted to make a quick comment about the signage item. I was looking through the presentation and I'm not sure if the signs are meant for vehicular traffic as well, but they do seem on the larger side. I would like them to be more human scale. But again, if it's also meant for vehicular traffic, then I think it's acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I think that'll become clearer maybe during the presentation. Hopefully, maybe Jen can mention something about that. Any other comments, Melissa?
No.
Okay. So public comments are closed, but we'll loop Connie back in if she makes mention that she wants to make a comment after a particular presentation. I assume that probably will be after Title 18 potentially, or after wayfinding potentially. That's my guess, knowing Connie anyway. So with that, it's time to get started with our regular business items. And first item here on the agenda is introductions. So Jeff, have at it.
Great, thanks, Brad. Good evening, everybody. Wanted to take a couple minutes here at the beginning of the meeting and introduce two new members to our department team that are part of our park operations division. Both started in the middle of May, and so have certainly jumped right into our super busy season. I want to have a chance to share a few words about both of them and then invite them each to share a bit about themselves, maybe their background, and certainly their observations these first couple of months on the job. So first is Kirsten Chapman, our new park operations manager. Kirsten comes to Issaquah with 20 plus years of experience in King County parks, working her way up through that system. Most recently, she managed 6 parks divisions, park maintenance divisions throughout the county. Each division probably similar in size to what our park operations team is. So all that to say, just a tremendous amount of knowledge. Been very impressed with her leadership. Certainly very impressed with just her overall experience of really all elements of the park system. Certainly very fortunate to have her as part of the team, and brings a lot of passion for public spaces and the role that parks, trails, and open space play in a community. So that's Kirsten. And then next, just a couple words. Peter Walters is our new park ranger. I've updated you a little bit earlier this year with the park ranger program. This is a new program that we have launched that really is providing a new element, a new aspect to customer service within our park system. Peter, you may recognize Peter. He spent some years working with state parks, also spent some years working here with us in the city of Issaquah. Again, just incredibly fortunate to have Peter part of the team. Just brings a tremendous gift of customer service, understanding and experience of public spaces. As I've expressed before to all of you with this new program, this is a non-commissioned ranger program. So there's varying degrees of commissioning of rangers. Commissioning meaning, do they carry a gun? Do they write civil tickets, etc. We're taking an approach that a number of cities around us have taken as a non-commissioned ranger. So that customer service piece, that enforcement piece, is really, really important to be able to do it with tact and do it with customer service. We've had the pleasure, Peter and Kirsten and I, visiting a couple of other cities to check out how they do their work, and it's just been great to see some of the outcomes and work that Peter's already been able to accomplish within the city. So so excited to have them both on board. I think we're very, very fortunate to have both of their skills and experience. So welcome. Kirsten, I don't know if your camera is working yet, but do you want to pop on and say hi and share a few words?
Know if you can see me. I don't see myself down below on the ribbon, so I apologize if it's not working. I'm looking right at it though, so if you can see me, I'm moving.
We can hear you loud and clear. Yeah.
Well, that was an awesome introduction. Probably work on my resume if I ever decide to leave, but at this point, I love working for Issaquah. It has been a fantastic 3 months, and I will tell you, by contrast to having worked for King County, the level of community involvement that we get to be involved with as public servants is, I've never experienced quite this, and I tell you, it really feels like that kind of family connection and the community and even staff with other staff. So I've never felt this supported before. And I will tell you too, after having seen the system now, it's kind of amazing how many types of sites are within the inventory, parks inventory, that are available to the public that you just don't see in other parts of King County. You know, where I can go on a hike, I can go to a baseball field, I can go within just a couple minutes. I can see so many different types. So very, very lucky. I feel lucky. Everyone that lives in Issaquah should feel lucky. It's a pretty special system. So I am just over the moon to be here. And yeah, a little bit more about me, I kind of started in the parks realm when I was 20, and I knew after my first season working as a seasonal that I was destined pair with parks. So what I'd like to bring to the team is kind of that sense of not just ownership, but looking at parks through the eyes of the folks that come to use those sites. So, what's the experience that we're trying to bring to the public, and what is it that the public wants from their site, and how can we do our best to be efficient and try to achieve everyone, the expectations and
Still there, Kirsten? I think we had a drop.
thank you, and I'm thrilled to be here.
There she is.
It's awesome. Kirsten, thank you so much. Any comments, questions for Kirsten before we jump over to Peter? So glad you're here, Kirsten. Oh, Ruben.
Okay. I was just curious, what was your first seasonal job? What were you doing?
Hi. My first season, I worked at Juanita Beach.
Oh,
So a lot of the places I've worked, and whether this is, I'm sure it's not my fault. Most of them got incorporated into other cities.
thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ruben. All right. So Peter, welcome. Share a few words.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Happily. I want to start and also say that it's been fantastic working with Kirsten. I've been wildly impressed with how fast she's picked up what's going on. I worked here previously and had some introductions to the park. And it feels like she got integrated faster than I did. So I've been wildly impressed with her. One of the things that I agree with her on is I love working with the city of Issaquah. We have a diverse park system that I feel very fortunate to be able to recreate in, and was drawn back here too by the amount of support I feel. So I'm glad she sees those similar things, and I think that's what's made it such a joy to work with her. I felt pretty instantly like, yeah, this is awesome. Our first week together, so very happy to be back on board and working as the park ranger. Information for me, I actually started out in hospitals, so that's an odd journey, but I missed being in Parks and Recreation. So I just kind of made the jump, and since like 2013, been slowly working my way towards this position through other Parks and Recreation internships, jobs, eventually moving out here from Michigan in 2016 to work with state parks. So yeah, that's the short of it. And
Well,
if you hear the newborn screaming, I apologize.
Yeah, I was just going to say congrats to that. Peter's had a few other things that he's been juggling in life. So new dad as well, which is really exciting. Peter, any just observations real quickly of what you've sort of seen within our parks and where your time and focus has been these first couple months?
Yeah. I think for a while it was a little frustrating for a while. COVID really interrupted our way to get a uniform and a way to get out into the parks. So that kind of took a while, and then we had the kids, so it was kind of a slow start for me. But just the past 2 months being out there and on the ground, we see people that are very passionate about the parks. People love stopping and chatting with me and seeing what's going on. People do not love me telling them to leash up their dog. That's a big one right there. A lot of time this past month has been spent with the homeless outreach effort with Amir, who I can't speak highly enough about as well. So that's where a decent amount of my effort has been. is doing homeless outreach, and then just trying to be a friendly presence in the park. Luckily, things have gone very smooth, and already we've had a wide variety of things come up. My first day that I had a uniform, we had an eagle fall out of its nest, and we got to go visit that. And before I knew it, someone had handed me this eagle in a box. So something I never thought I would deal with. And then we've had anything from homeless outreach, off-leash dog. Someone put a, oh my goodness, hammock. Someone put a hammock up in one of our sequoias, like a good 50, 60 feet. And it looked like just a weekend warrior. So it's been excellent. You never know what you're going to deal with every day you go out into the parks. And, you know, I always end up seeing friendly people way more often than I have negative interactions. So that's been fantastic so far.
So, Peter, I have a question. So, do you
Go ahead, Brad.
roam around to virtually all the parks eventually, or do you focus on just a certain amount of them?
Yeah, it depends on what our focus is. So right now, I've been trying to hit some of the areas where we're having more of the homeless outreach and consistent issues. So we've had more interaction at Front Street Properties and Emily Darst. But then in general, I do try and make it a point to try and hit all of our trails, open spaces, and parks throughout the month. If we're having particular issues, Kirsten and I are very of the mind that we should try and activate those spaces. So I'm working on a plan to do some interpretive programming at Front Street and some guided hikes through the Pickering Barn Trail and Emily Darst as a way that I can be there longer to hopefully have contacts, and then activate that space so more people are going through it. So hopefully any negative issues that we're seeing, we can kind of tone those down through positive interactions. But yeah, it's a lot of space to cover. I've already had like some of the tennis and friends groups are very excited to see me, but then are like, hey, where were you? And it's like, oh, at a million other places. So I can try and be there, but it's hard to be everywhere at once.
If you had to engage the police with any issues?
Not yet. Fortunately, we haven't had anything come up or rise to that level. This position does have a radio, so I will have access to contact the police. I guess that's a small lie. We did have someone vandalize property at Tibbetts Valley Park. And we had to make a case number for police, but that wasn't like bringing anyone on contact or having anything. So why that's a feature of the position, very fortunately, we haven't had that happen.
Great.
Yeah, this position, just as a quick overview, and again, Peter just reflects this so well, really is that bridge between our park operations team and police from a public safety standpoint. So rather than waiting and relying on them, though it's just one position and Peter does a great job and can't be all places at once, but just to be able to be that additional eyes in the park, provide some degree of enforcement, be a support for our park maintenance team. And his partnering and work with Kirsten has already just been paid off immensely, not to mention the crew as well. But then having that radio, as Peter said, and being that support for police, so they're not having to respond to everything in the parks, but they're certainly in some ways able to respond quicker with Peter and his radio. So exciting new program that we're just jumping into. Kirsten as well. That has been a long, if you may recall from some of my conversations earlier, that's been having a park operations manager has been vacant for quite a few years here in Issaquah, and really is a key position to provide that strategic oversight, that strategic leadership, and how we want to steward and maintain our system. And I can't be more impressed or thrilled with just her expertise and the leadership she's providing in that. So happy to introduce them tonight, and just can't be more thrilled to have them as part of a really impressive Parks and Community Services team. So thanks for letting me do that. Peter, Kirsten, thanks for joining us.
Yes, so much. I'm been fortunate to have actually known Peter over a number of years here now, so I'm really glad to see him on the team, and look forward to meeting Kirsten here at some point, or at least seeing your face on a virtual platform maybe next time. So thanks for that. Both of you are certainly welcome to continue on with us here this evening, but I'm sure you've got a busy schedule as well, and so you're also welcome to move on if you would like. So Thanks again, and welcome to the Issaquah Parks team. So that being said, our next item on the agenda is with Minnie going to give us a presentation about Title 18 code updates. So I don't know if you need to do any introduction here, Jeff, or not, but if not, I mean, you can do it yourself, I guess.
Yeah, maybe a super quick one. So Minnie Dollywall is Community Planning Department Director, has been on board, she can tell you, but it's a couple of months now. I must say, as a fellow department head, it's been great working with Minnie on a couple of fronts. She brings a great array of experience, planning and community development experience with other local cities. So she's here to give an overview of a really important lift in revising and updating the development code, which is known as Title 18. So without stealing any of her thunder or jumping into subjects I don't really know as well, here's Minnie.
Good evening, everyone. So glad to be here and get to know all the community members and all the number of hours you spend your evenings, because you care about this wonderful city. And so as part of our project, we are updating our regulations and codes, and we have looked upon some of your services to help Planning and Policy Commission and have a discussion about open spaces and landscape and trees. So you bring your expertise in those topics to help inform some of the discussion with the Planning and Policy Commission, who will then make a recommendation to City Council for formally adopting the Title 18, which is the land use code. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on what that whole project is, what are the codes, and so on and so forth. But before I do that, I would like to get to share my screen, Melissa, or can you make me do you have to give me permissions to share?
Yes, I'm passing that over to you right now. You should have the permissions now.
Great. Let's see.
There it is.
Perfect. So let me make sure. So everyone can see my screen without the little dots and things that I'm seeing? Is it good?
Good.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. So like I said, thank you for your time tonight. So today we'll talk about the Title 18 Land Use Code update. So what exactly is land use code? It's a range of development regulations. So if anyone wants to develop their land, it could be divided up, how they plan to use it, if they want to build something on the property, different uses they want to put on the property, what kind of landscaping and design happens on that. So all of that is bundled in together with this larger code. And a little bit of background on when this was adopted in the city was in 1996, and over the years it's become this patchwork of ordinances. So then the City Council formed a Land Use Title 18 Ad Hoc Committee. It's made up of 3 council members. They were tasked with identifying the stakeholders, recommending a project scope, a public engagement plan, and making the policy decisions on this code. And that effort has started. And in April, City Council awarded the professional services contract to the consultant team who will be assisting in this effort. So a little bit about what is the framework for land use code. It has to be consistent with some fundamental planning framework in this state of Washington. So at the very beginning, it's the Growth Management Act. Then that establishes the vision for this area for the next 20, 40 years. How is it going to grow? How, what are some parameters? So that happens at the Puget Sound Regional Council's level. Then King County has to adopt their countywide planning policies, which are again consistent with all those underlying laws. And then Issaquah decides what their unique cities plans need to be, but they have to be consistent with all of these underlying laws and policies. And then once we've adopted the comprehensive plan, it informs what the regulations need to be. and how to get, so basically the land use regulations are an implementation tool for these long-term visions for the region, for the area, for the city. So the Growth Management Act, which was, it's basically encourages smart growth, sustainable development. It was passed in the 1990s. There's been some amendments over the years, but the basic premise here is that you are keeping growth within a boundary so that you're reducing the sprawl from taking over your open spaces and extend, so that people are spending more time in their cars. So that's discouraged. So efficient multimodal transportation is encouraged. There are a variety of housing options for people to live in. There's economic development. People's property rights are protected from arbitrary and discriminatory actions. People can get their permit in a timely manner, and we administer them fairly. So the most important one for this group is open space and recreation is part of these laws from that establish development in our state. So under this law, we have to encourage retention of open space and recreation areas. So any of these policies have to do that. We have to protect the environment and enhance the quality of life. We have to engage the citizens in the planning process, and so on and so forth. So that's a little bit of a very quick, brief summary of what growth management planning in our state is. There are some other laws where it was determined, many years, decades ago, that some of these things are of interest statewide. So as you divide land, it becomes important that it's done in a consistent manner throughout the state. So there are subdivision laws that happen at the state level that we have to be consistent with. Now, critical areas, which are the wetlands, the streams, the steep slopes, and so on and so forth, are also, there are state laws that we have to be consistent with, and we have to update our regulations every few years so that we stay consistent with best available science. The shoreline regulations apply in Issaquah, and we have 3 bodies of water that those regulations apply to. The SEPA is an acronym, but basically it's the Environmental Policy Act that looks at things that aren't met through the codes, but are looking at more cumulative impacts and trying to capture those through that process. So now moving on to what are the city's adopted visions, goals, and policies. So as some of you may have already volunteered on some of these plans were being in place and have your fingerprints on them, but we have a strategic plan. In your memo, I included a link to these so you can kind of look at those if you're not familiar with them. The comprehensive plan is a requirement of the Growth Management Act, and we have to keep it updated. We also adopted a Central Issaquah plan many years ago, and then have updated it over the years. Parks strategic plan. So the consultant that worked on the Parks strategic plan, Berger, is also helping us with some of these topics that we need your help in figuring out how what is envisioned in this park strategic plan can then be implemented through some of these regulations. One, it's so that it's consistent. 2, that we don't miss the opportunities where there are these connections between different parks, between different trails, and development occurs, that we don't put the building in the middle of it and things of that nature. So there's that consistency issue, but also some incentives of how to get this vision established. As development occurs, we want to make sure that we are doing it in a way that it's consistent with the park strategic plan. So in addition to all those long-range plans, a city council and the Title 18 ad hoc committee, through the work with some community members, and then Planning and Policy Commission also weighed in on some of these goals, issues, objectives, and outcomes chart. That's what we're calling it. I included a more detailed version in your packet. So that establishes some of the goals and the desired outcomes that the City Council desires out of this Title 18 update. So there are about 13 goals. but protecting our hillsides, providing adequate parking but using land efficiently, conserving and protecting environmentally critical areas from loss, enhancing wetland and riparian corridors, improving public awareness of development and construction activities, increasing housing diversity, preserving tree canopy, retaining neighborhood charm and distinctive character, then creating a livable community, which Parks Department and the Parks Planning, that they're very key to having meeting some of these goals that the community desires. Sustainable development and climate goals are also desired. Again, management of travel. Number 11, which is what we need your help on, is successfully implement the park strategic plan and green necklace through land use regulations. And so it's definitely what council has charged us to do, and we've started work on that. Again, I think most of you may be familiar with a strategic plan, but there is growth and development is one of the goals. So there's a whole chapter on that. Environmental stewardship is another goal. So through this, what we want to do is establish some of those common things desired in those goals to be implemented through Title 18 Land Use Code update. Just a little bit of background for some of you that may need a little refresher on comprehensive plan is actually a 20-year plan. It's required for the city to do, and it looks out at how the city is going to grow in the next 20 years, and there are certain mandatory elements that each city has to have in their comprehensive plan. Parks and open space plan is not one of those, so some cities don't have it, but Issaquah made the choice that this is important, and that parks, recreation, trails, and open space is a separate element in the comprehensive plan. And then we have, of course, the most recent park strategic plan. The goals and policies of this plan coincide with the Growth Management Act's goals for development of parks and recreation facilities. And the goal is to provide opportunities for current and the growing population, retaining some of these natural open spaces, preserving fish and wildlife habitat, and providing access points. So these are two main documents that we'll be looking at. So again, like I said, in the comprehensive plan, there are multiple elements that we have in our comprehensive plan here, but land use and parks and recreation are the ones this group is going to focus on. So the way the comprehensive plan is set up, there'll be a goal, and I included these links, but this is just one example. So if the goal says maintain and enhance a natural system and features of the city and surrounding area from potentially negative impact, and then the policy underneath that goal talks about how we can do, some of the policies would be encouraging efficient use of land by clustering your buildings or providing limiting how much impervious surface you can have, how much open space you need, and things of that nature. And then the land use code is really going to get into the details of what does this really mean. If you build that many units, you need to have X amount of space per unit. So it really gets into an implementation of what that really can be accomplished as private development or development occurs in the city. Here's an example from your park strategic plan. The goal talks about enhancing and diversifying and expanding parks, trails, recreation, and open space for today and for future generations. So the policy underneath talks about secondary connections. How do we connect the neighborhood and the development of the city's primary trail system through connectors, trails, spur trails, and so on. So the land use code will then say, if you do redevelopment or if you do development, then this is the width of the trail that you need to connect to, or you have to accommodate for or adopt the trails plan in the land use or reference this plan so that it's consistent, and as redevelopment occurs, we keep these things in mind, that the goals and policies in the park strategic plan were put together by the community. Here I just took some pictures from from our park strategic plan. Again, some pictures that show what a green necklace character looks like, how different places are supposed to be connected, what they need to look like. So in the land use code, if there's an opportunity to maintain these connections, we want to make sure those are either created at the time of development, or those opportunities are preserved. Obviously, as you probably all know, we do collect park impact fees as development occurs. So those are adopted, and they're based on the type of development that occurs that goes into the park's capital fund. Again, this is from the park strategic plan that discusses different types of open spaces, what are different types of connections. So a lot of work went in from all of you, from the community, of establishing this green necklace map. We want to make sure that as the land use code is updated, that these are consistent and opportunities are preserved and maintained, but also created. So some other things for land use code update, we also have the Central Issaquah plan that talks about most of the development in the community should be livable, sustainable, compact, where pedestrians are a priority, and balance of mix of uses. And again, it all circles back to all of these long-term visions. Then Title 18 is an implementation tool that's going to have the language that gives us predictability as redevelopment occurs, what is desired outcome from getting that development. So like I said, the land use code update is a huge chunk of code and regulations. But for the purposes of this update, we've split them into 6 different categories. So the first one is the natural environment. The second is landscape, green necklace, and open space. And that's where your role comes in. And then the other ones are zoning and uses, building and design, other development standards, and other process and procedures. So we're trying to engage with other boards. So for instance, the natural environment, we've asked for help from environmental board to assist Planning and Policy Commission have a discussion on those topics. For the landscape and open space topics, we've asked your commission to have that discussion with the Planning and Policy Commission. And we're hoping for that to occur on September 9th. And at the end of the day, what that will mean, and we'll go into more details on September 9th and prep you for this, but this is just to give you a little primer of when we get development, we're looking at development of a site. What do these connections mean? How do we improve the pedestrian connection? How do we integrate nature with a defined sense of place? And it used to be in the Central Issaquah, but now it's the park strategic plan. How do we bring nature and add to green elements to form a necklace through these developed areas, physically, visually, or both? Buildings and pavings cover a lot of the site, but we need to draw the nature and green in to soften the urbanizing community. As more compact development occurs, landscape is more important, and it's not just a filler of unused space. It needs to be more deliberately thought out. So the land use code has a chapter on landscaping. It has a chapter on trees that we'll be getting into on September 9th. Again, when this is how it works out on the ground. So when someone wants to develop their property, they give us all these plans of where the parking's going to be, where the building's going to be, where the landscaping is, where the trail connections are, what kind of community spaces can be produced. And then it goes through a whole public process. We collaborate, we have pre-applications, we do a staff report. Sometimes these projects go to Development Commission. We give them a notice to proceed. Then they come in and apply for their construction permits. And at that time, they can build. And once it's fully done, then we give them an occupancy to occupy those buildings. So that's sort of the various steps in the development process. So that pretty much concludes a very, quick discussion of what land use code is, what these long-term visions are, what undertaking we're doing with this update. And I'm open to answer any questions either in this meeting, or if you want to, call me outside of this meeting, I'm happy to have one-on-one discussion with you and get into more detail if you desire. Hi, Jeff.
So, Jeff, I see your hand up. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, just a really quick add, and thank you, Minnie, for that really broad overview. And certainly as we roll into fall and have this opportunity to have a little bit more of an interface with the Title 18 update, yeah, I want to ask for forgiveness of the park board. I was going to send you a little email last week, but things got a little crazy. If you could mark your calendar for Thursday, September 9th, this is really a first opportunity for that interface. Those of you that were around when we were doing the park strategic plan might remember in 2017, we had a couple of joint meetings with the Planning Policy Commission about the Green Necklace, and having an opportunity to, as we were moving that park strategic plan towards adoption, to really setting some further clarity and goals and vision for the Green Necklace. So this is a chance for us to help the PPC in their effort, right, with Title 18. So September 9th is a chance to get a little deeper. Minnie, if I'm not mistaken, again, the goal of the meeting on the 9th will be to really focus on that landscape section with a little bit more detail and focus.
Yeah, so the way we envision September 9th is that there's the Burger who's helping with some of these topics, and then there's another consultant who's helping with the tree chapter update. So the tree chapter, what we're going to try and do is give you code update memos that will give you a little bit of background. Don't feel overwhelmed by them. There may be, we're going to try and give you as much information as possible, but you feel free to look at it and at your level what you think you want to get out of that. But the basic idea is to identify what are the gaps in the regulations, how are they inconsistent, or what's missing from our regulations in when we compare them to some of these long-term visions, or if you have other ideas. Yeah.
The lens you're looking for is really as residents, right? Not as, I mean, we're not a bunch of professional planners, but it's really as Issaquah residents. What are you seeing? And again, having that opportunity to just be another layer of perspective as that work is happening. Is that a safe way to put it, Minnie? Yeah.
That is correct. So we are dividing this whole update process into 3 phases. The first phase is identifying where the gaps are, where the missing pieces are. The second phase is going to be where we actually, write up the code language based on the proposed approach and direction we've given after this first phase, and that'll be a public hearing to actually solicit comments from the public on an actual document. And then Planning and Policy Commission will then deliberate and finalize their recommendation. So that'll be phase 3. So right now we'll be in phase 1, an introduction to the topics and really looking for feedback, what you think we should be looking at for implementing the vision in our land use regulations.
So, Minnie, I think you kind of touched upon this, but I just wanted to clarify. So is Burger then going to be providing a landscape architect then as their element of expertise to this effort?
Correct. They're assisting the city with doing the gaps analysis and preparing the draft for the landscape chapter, the Green Necklace, the parks and open space piece. it may be sprinkled throughout some other chapters because those regulations may go into, but they're helping with this effort initially. And then the trees are a separate thing, which talk about retention, how much needs to be retained, what are some details of planting, what kind of tree permits do you need. So that's a separate chapter, and another consultant's helping with that. But on September 9th, we hope to cover the green necklace, the open space, and the landscape chapter and the trees.
Okay. Questions from the board? You can just raise your hand if you have something. And Zach and Danielle, you don't have video, and so you'd probably have to make something in the chat so that Melissa can pick that up. Any questions or comments from the board? Not seeing anything. I guess you covered it really well here, Minnie. I give Connie an opportunity if she had any interest in jumping in. I think this might be an agenda item that she might have some comment.
Indeed. I said, want to comment, please, in my notes. So the Parks Board doesn't get a lot of opportunity to try to deal in code implementation. So I don't feel that this is an easy ask of the Park Board. So I want to give you some of the tools that I use and some of the things that just make me absolutely batshit crazy about the overlap of the, shall we say, natural environment on our parks, and oddly, you get landscaping. So what I do is I cruise around town on foot or in my car, and I look at parking lots and I say, wow, that's awful. Why does it have no trees? And then you think to yourself, what do I want it to look like? For example, look at Lazy Boy. And you say about Lazy Boy, why does Lazy Boy have no trees in their parking lot? And then you look at the new roundabout that goes to Costco and the plantings and that whole road section, and you say to yourself, it doesn't look like anybody maintains this. Who's responsible for maintaining the things that we do plant? And how is that funded in perpetuity? And is it written down anywhere that we can actually make sure that this actually happens? And then you think to yourself, what did Jeff's face look like when we were trying to figure out what the Gateway Park should be? And how do we get rid of that grimace so that we know every time we have new development, it is not a battle to get an awesome park and facilities for those people in a way that is maintained and protective of the environment? And so to me, it's a basic SWOT analysis, and we don't seem to be doing that in this critical area update. What are the strengths of our town, and what do we actually do well? And what do we do badly? And so how can we make the bad things really good, and how can we leverage the things that we already do better? But in order to understand comments that you might want to make, you actually have to look around your world and say, is this good or is this bad? And if you become familiar, not necessarily with just your parks themselves, but with the development as it works with parks, then I think you'll have an easier time coming up with suggestions on how to make it better. And so here's another little one. If we have a line of mature trees that are going alongside of a road, should we have a rule saying that we must take down those trees in order to plant landscaping? And so how do you make that decision? And obviously I'm talking about Tibbetts Creek Park and Newport Way. So, and And these are all the things that we go through on a daily basis. We have some rules saying we don't even need trees at all in a parking lot. We can just use vertical, upright, metallic units. And that is considered appropriate decoration for a parking lot. Do you agree that that is correct? Should we do that? If we're trying to water our stuff, should we have more pervious pavement in our parking lots? And unfortunately, you guys who are parks oriented never quite, I think, had to think this way. But please, in order to be able to provide awesome information, try to make yourselves do it every time you go out and about for the next month, and write yourself notes, and of course shoot them off to your parks people because they love it when you do that. And I think I'm going to stop there because I don't know how else to make it easier for you, but bless your hearts for trying. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Appreciate the insight. I knew you had some good wisdom here to bestow upon us here. So, and I think that's a good recommendation to at least keep our eyes open as we're moving around town here over the next couple of weeks before we have this September 9th meeting. Any other, Jeff, you got something?
You have Peter in the comment box looking to make a comment if you have a second.
Okay. Well, Jeff, we'll do you and then Peter.
Oh, sounds good. Yeah, no, I was just going to piggyback on a couple of things Connie said, and I think get confirmation from Minnie, and it's an important perspective change. So Title 18 development regs are not, you are being asked to think beyond our public parks, open spaces, and trails. That's so often what your realm is and what our conversations are. This opportunity to speak into Title 18 and those development regs really are, yes, they govern our public development, but it really is that perspective of private development as well. And so, yeah, important to sort of think of that perspective as you're, as Connie suggests, looking around town, observing things, and bringing that little broader private and public perspective, and not just the public realm that we're so often talking about. Would you agree with that, Minnie?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's you may have expertise in a lot of things that we are missing out. So I think from your lived experience, yes, you may all be focused on how to design, how to fund the parks, where to design them, what kind of spaces, what the community desires. But the chance through the Title 18 update is to bring that into a reality for the future generations, because the development is not going to get, produced tomorrow. I mean, you design a park, you build a park, it's instantaneous. You get to see it. With the development regulations, it happens over time, but it has to be planned and thought of early so that you don't miss those opportunities. So sometimes these things, it takes a while for it to come to fruition, but if we don't do the planning, if we don't think of these interplay between these different plans, then we can miss those opportunities.
Peter, you had something?
Yeah, this might be a wee bit obscure, I guess I should say, but Connie, when I was listening to her, it just made me think about it. As far as like an environmental and focusing on climate impacts of the future, I would really hope that we think boldly about parking lots as far as just not requiring them. This gets way into the weeds, I guess, on some of the carbon footprinting and choices people make, but some cities have higher parking requirements and it really limits options. But I think eliminating parking or lower parking, people are encouraged to think of alternate opportunities and routes. And we already provide stuff like the 200 bus, which is a free bus. We have a great transit system built in. So as far as long-term planning, I think that really helps lower our carbon footprint, give people alternate opportunities of transit, and really focus on how we want people to transit around our own city. So I don't know if it belongs there, but just like an obscure climate change 50-year oriented goal on some very obscure policy choices. So otherwise, that's about it.
Thanks, Peter. I mean, I do think that that's applicable. I mean, it's something that we need to be thinking about in this process, and probably also shows the importance of connections that we really tried to include in the park strategic plan, as the future of moving around the city without necessarily having to be in a car to do that. And we haven't really talked too much necessarily about transit opportunities as a part of that, but certainly walking ability and bicycles and that kind of thing is something I think we had focused on. So, and I think the whole climate change part of it is something that we need to be paying attention to. Any other comments or questions from board members? Melissa, are you aware of anybody else from the community that has comment on this? I didn't think there would be.
No.
Okay, thank you, Minnie. Appreciate that presentation. Gives us a good overview and something to think about as we prepare for the September 9th meeting. And we'll get something more out to the board in terms of when that occurs and all of that. We're still a couple weeks out, so.
And Minnie, you anticipate that'll be a virtual joint meeting?
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
time of that again?
6:30 p.m.
6:30 p.m. virtual. Brady
Yeah,
Bunch panels.
We'll get you guys the invite sent out.
And that's primarily between the Parks Board and
Planning and Policy Commission.
Planning Policy, right? Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
and a week prior to the meeting, we'll send you a packet with some information about what the meeting's going to discuss.
Okay. Sounds good. Again,
Great.
Thank you so much and look forward to
Glad
seeing
to
you in
meet
a
you
couple
all.
weeks.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
So with that, I think we'll move on to Blackberry Park, and Jennifer's going to just a bit of an update and discussion on that.
Melissa, can you please make me a presenter?
Okay, that's coming your way.
Yep, got it. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Give me just a quick second here. Can everyone see that?
Not yet.
How about now?
Not yet. Oh,
Oh.
it's coming.
Yep. Here we are. There you go.
Okay. Great. Give me just one quick second here to get my screens oriented. So thank you for having me again tonight. Blackberry Park. It's been a little bit since we've given you an update in the last one. So I'm just going to kind of give you a quick update as to where we've been with some of the engagement and where we are in the design process. Oop. So as y'all may remember, Blackberry Park is in the South Cove neighborhood, and the recreational facilities that are there were built with community interest. And this park came to the city in 2017, I believe, from King County. And so the play equipment that is there does not meet city standards. And so we've been working with the neighborhood to figure out how to make some additional improvements. We started this engagement back in February with our first community workshop and online survey. We had about 20 meeting attendees, and we got 149 responses. And the topics of that engagement were the different types of play and potential materials they would like to see within the park. We met with the design team and reconvened with the community back in April 28th to further discuss some design options. And this was really highly attended meeting, and we received 281 survey responses. The topics of that meeting were more themed place concepts with more specific play options for people to really react to. We presented 2 themes to the community, and we received pretty clear direction as to which way they wanted to go. And what that was with the Caster's Castle being the preferred design theme, as well as they really wanted to retain the pickleball courts. So as you may recall from past meetings, here's just a view of Caster's Castle and what some of the concept look like. And then also the little red fish concept. So with all the feedback from that second community workshop, the consultant team has been working to create a proposed final design. There was also in those surveys an opportunity for some online written comments as well, and we also received comments from the workshops themselves. But all of this feedback has directly informed the park's design. The design demonstrates what we can afford with the current available project budget. And as part of a separate project in 2022, we will resurface the pickleball courts, hearing a high need from the community to retain those and also keep them as a pickleball location, because this neighborhood loves their pickleball. So right now there is an online survey that is out and has been advertised to the neighborhood. And if you've not, so I'm showing you exact pictures from the survey that's online. And we're really just wanting feedback from the community, since this is very representative of Caster's Castle. It's been tweaked a little bit to fit our available project budget. However, we want to make sure we have hit the nail on the head with the community, and we're really just asking them, did we get it right? What other comments would you have after taking a look at this? So here's one aerial view. Here's somewhat of another aerial view. And then kind of a ground view as you'd be walking through the park as to what the experience would be. We'd have a couple of swings and a basket swing off to the left. As you walk in, we've got some logs with some patterning on the sidewalk. There's some rubberized surfacing. And then we've also got this play gym with some steppers and some ghost forest logs and a slide, and some other logs for the kids to play in, and some ropes as well for them. And here's some of the material palette that we would be using, kind of create some of that driftwood look that you would see, you know, that beavers use in their lodges, as well as kind of the water theme with the blue. And here's some ideas of what the proposed final design. Here's some larger features so you can see how they might be used by the children. And so we've got this survey out right now on the webpage. If you go to issaquah.gov/Blackberry Play Area, you can find the link, and the survey will be up through the end of this month, so August 31st. So as I mentioned, this design is being shared with the neighborhood. And I've got a nice email list I've been working with, and it's also out on social media. Our next steps would be to get any feedback, make any modifications to the drawing if needed, and then create a construction set of drawings for permit submittal. The permitting process is likely going to take us 2 to 4 months to get through, and construction is likely going to start late this year or early 2022. And again, as I mentioned, also the pickleball resurfacing would also occur in 2022 as well. And I think timing wise, they might align nicely. Further information can be found on the project webpage there. There's the URL again. And with that, that's pretty much my update as to where we are in Blackberry Park.
Jeff, got something?
Yeah, just real quick. Thank you, Jen. Great overview. I think just in handing it off to you, Brad, and Park Board, I think the opportunity is to, again, get answer any of your questions. Also, just I think get a sense if you all think we're headed in the right direction. A couple of just overview, I guess, comments to this project. You know, you may recall as we ventured into this, understanding both Blackberry and Hillside Park understanding the scale of them as really neighborhood parks, walk-in neighborhood parks. As we think about play, we also wanted to make sure the scale of this play area and these play areas fit that. We're not intending these to be a destination park that generates a lot of traffic. It really is that the service area we're looking at is that South Lake Sammamish area. So getting their feedback will be really important. Just one addition about the project budget, and certainly staying within it, focusing the project budget on play and that commitment to replacing the play. And then at the same time, recognizing we'll have some 2022 operational dollars to resurface the pickleball court to create that, address that need too. I think really helps us leverage our dollars and get more bang for our buck in terms of making this park improvement. So would love any feedback you all have on where we're at, and we're getting close to moving into final feedback from the neighborhood and permitting.
Thanks, Jeff. Ruben, you have something?
Yeah, it's actually more of a generic question on all of the different projects going on. I noticed that, all the new materials, the rubberized materials, the different kinds of materials, has that had an impact either to enhance your maintenance efforts or to keep them about the same? I'm just curious. You're replacing one set of playground equipment with more modern stuff. I wonder what the maintenance impact is for you.
Yeah, in terms of surfacing options on play, it's certainly become a lot more flexible, Ruben. I would say, and if Kirsten's still on, she could certainly jump on. But when you look at the opportunity for rubberized surfacing, the maintenance, the annual maintenance is far less, quite frankly. Wood chips are workable, but the amount of touch that we have to do, either in replacing, adding, wood chips travel too throughout other parts of the park, whereas rubberized surfacing doesn't. So maintenance-wise, it's more friendly. It's also far more accessible. As we look at really creating accessible play, where we can have rubberized surfacing or some of these other newer surfacing that creates accessibility for all physical abilities, that is tremendous. So a big added bonus to a surface like that as well.
And one last question.
I just
in the design elements, you never see garbage cans or waste receptacles. I'm just wondering. I'm sure they'll be there. What that is in terms of maintenance for you.
Oh yeah, they'll be there. They're going to be our standard ones, and they're so routine we didn't even put them in there.
The old bear-proof ones. Yeah.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Got it.
Exactly. And then just to comment, we are going to have a combination of the rubberized and play chips just to make the budget, but we're going to be using the rubberized under the swings where they really tend to shift a lot more than the more so than with the play chips. So that's really one of those high touch areas that can really reduce our maintenance immediately by having that rubberized surfacing under a swing versus the play chips.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members? I'm not seeing any. The people who don't have video on, if you can somehow maybe send a chat or something if you wanted to make a comment or a question.
Hey, Brett, just one quick question. Is the plan to completely shut the park while the updates are being made, or are you going to do it in stages?
The park would be fully impacted. I think it's going to be the easiest way to do that because of equipment access, staging areas, removal of, invasive vegetation. It is going to be quite impactful. So it would be closed during that whole time.
It's such a small park as well. It'd be hard to keep some portion of it open.
Yeah, but it's probably a 2 to 3 month process at max.
So I have a couple things I wanted to comment or question. The surveys, those are specific to the neighborhood, right? This is not open to the community. Is that correct?
The first one actually was, but we didn't get too many responses from outside the neighborhood. And with every survey, I keep adding those who provide us our email contacts. I provide them direct connection. for future surveys and communications on the project.
But the majority would be people in that neighborhood, though.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. And been encouraging them to share, which is partly why there was such an increase between the two meetings. The neighborhood's really talking about it, which is great.
I noticed it's a little hard to tell in graphics sometimes. In the graphics, all the white logs, is that intended to be natural driftwood? Is that what's going to occur, or what?
So it is a log, and it just has a white finish on it to give that ghost appearance. It will fade in time, and then the wood will slowly turn to gray and silver naturally. But initially, it's going to be a little on the whiter side. But then as that fades off, we can either restain it or we can just let it fade to the gray.
Yeah, I would think natural would be be better than, my only concern there would be white painted logs probably wouldn't be very aesthetically.
Yeah, it's not a solid white. It would be something that you can see the grain through. It's more like a light wash. You know, if you've ever seen paint and water mixed down where it just kind of changes the tint of something, that's what this would more be like, rather than a pure white column out there.
And I didn't notice, it went by pretty quickly, but I didn't notice anything about a blackberry patch. Has that now been decided to just remove that altogether?
Correct. Yes, it would be removed from the site.
And that's because the community just said, why keep it?
A bit of both. Coming to the realization they are invasive species. We did have option to have some raised garden and introduce some other types. Budget-wise, we can't get there, but that's not right now with the cost of the play elements. But that's not to say that down the road they couldn't be introduced or other things. There were some other comments too about how we might pay homage to blackberries without having blackberries there. So, but they would be removed.
Yeah, it was. I would say majority of neighborhood response was, "Hey, we don't need the blackberries there anymore. We want more field space or play space." So as we tried to balance all of those, the plan now would be remove the blackberries as is. And as Jen says, if there's a desire for blackberry picking 1 month out of the year, we would want to create. We'd want to create it in a way that is far less invasive.
Right. So at some point, if we don't add that, we might even give some consideration to renaming the park.
This is, yeah, perhaps I think we would really take the lead of the neighborhood. You know, honestly, the origin story of this park really being the neighborhood built this as it was King County property, and so we really, like all of our parks, are stewards of the parks for others. But you know, that name has real meaning for that neighborhood. So I don't think the city would ever take the lead in initiating a name change unless the neighborhood wanted to.
Any change in any additional landscaping, like all the lawn and all of that, is that just going to stay the way it is, or is that going to be updated?
We will have to renovate some of the lawn as part of this, just due to construction activity. But there is no irrigation system at the site. So, you know, we are going to have to modify. We are introducing trees, or there are none on site right now. And those will be watered with water bags.
So they get set. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any. So thank you, Jen. Appreciate that. It's good to have an update, and we'll talk further on that as things progress. Probably after the next survey, I assume, right? After the community looks at what's out there now. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. The survey is out right now through the end of this month, and then we'll collect any feedback and hopefully start proceeding soon with our permit set.
Yeah, we'll continue to provide you updates as we prep for permitting and start that process, and keep you all informed. So,
okay.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Jen. Sounds good. I guess that just segues right into wayfinding, Jennifer. So you're still on the hook here.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Now we can. We can
All
see
right.
it too.
Yep.
Good. That's a good thing. All right. So I'm glad we're having this opportunity to share with you kind of where we are in the wayfinding and city signage update. So what is wayfinding? Wayfinding is a system of signs and visual cues that help people navigate through a city, guiding residents, visitors, and employees to destinations such as cities, facilities, parks, trails, businesses, schools, and transit stops. A successful signage system provides a sense of identity and a sense of place. It helps in decision making when moving throughout the city, and it also informs modes of travel such as vehicles, walking, biking, and even rolling, scootering these days. This project also includes signage for City of Issaquah gateways, facilities, parks, open space, trailheads, trails, and directional signs for vehicular as well as pedestrians. As part of this design process, pre-COVID, through a RFP process, a request for proposal process, we contracted with KPG. At that time, we created a steering group, which consists of many neighborhood folks, including Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Issaquah, Visit Issaquah, Food Bank, Department of Natural Resources, Arts Commission, Park Board, Brad's on that, and other folks to help guide us in our process, making sure we're getting some signage that reflects Issaquah. We've also been working, had to internal staff meetings, because as the signage system becomes part of the city, we really need to be thinking about maintenance, installation costs, and lighting, and are we putting the signs in the right locations for each of our facilities, as well as for visitors and residents. We also met with the Youth Advisory Board and had a really fun workshop with them. You might remember Ryan updating you a couple months ago about that process as we were in the month of May doing a full month of public engagement. As part of that public engagement, you may recall seeing these signs out. They were in 12 different locations throughout the city, and we tried to meet people where they were at, as well as doing a massive survey to the public, and also doing a lot of social media and promotional e-blasts. We ended up reaching over 11,000 people with our outreach, and this was one of the biggest survey responses we have had yet throughout the city. From those 11,000 touches, 25% of them proceeded to the survey, and 1,306 people successfully completed the survey. Our survey was published in English as well as Spanish and Mandarin, which is really nice. It was one of our first bigger efforts to also do that. But these concepts, when we sent out the survey for the public engagement, this was really, as you know, with design, it is an iterative process. And then the survey was purposely set up to be more qualitative, to understand what people liked about each concept than to pick a clear winner. And we focused on 6 design elements for each of the different concepts. So each of the 4 concepts had a series of 6 items that people could comment on about the aesthetics, whether or not they like the art, did the colors work well together, the composition, the shape, material finish, did they like what the materials, and also did the sign itself reflect the character of Issaquah. Some of the additional, of the 1,300 comments, we received over 600 written comments. A lot of them were yes, no, thank you. But we did get a lot of additional input that really focused on color preference, though there was some concerns about making sure the signs are visible within our environment. We're dark much of the year, as well as we live in a very green environment, and making sure that these signs are legible both at night when driving, but also in our dark environment when our days are very short. This is also for residents and non-residents. It's for drivers and non-drivers, but it was also interesting to see some of the demographics, or the changes by group preference. Overall, flora and fauna, #1, probably got the highest overall marks. However, mountain silhouettes received a lot of favorable comment as well, especially about the color and also character, and as well as composition, color also in the topography and waterways. Now with the younger group, like the Issaquah Youth Advisory Board, the younger generations really tended to kind of hit this more modern theme, with that simplicity resonating with them. So what we have done through all the feedback we received from these different signs, knowing there were good things about each sign, things people liked more than other things, like they may like the color on one, the composition on one, and which one resonated Issaquah. And we worked with the consultant team to decipher all of that information into one preferred concept. And so right now, this is our proposed design. It reflects the Issaquah Alps. I'll focus here on the center gateway sign. This is going to be the largest of all the sign types. As part of this process, we had only shown the monument signs, but there is going to be a suite of signs for both major vehicular routes, pedestrian routes, regional trails, vertical gateway signs for multi-purpose trails. There's also going to be facility signage, park signage, trailhead signage for more rural areas versus urban areas. So, but this concept really reflects the 4 Issaquah Alps. Right here to the left, where if you can see my cursor, this is Tiger Mountain. And then we have Squawk Mountain here, and then the ridge line of Cougar is down in the bottom, and the Grand Ridge is over on this side. So we've also have these vertical signs here and as well. And as a group, we met just last week with the steering committee again. And as we were looking at some of these sign concepts, one of the pieces of feedback we received is that the hills, they love the shape of the hills, but the color wasn't sitting well with folks. And also, they felt that there needed to be more symbology about the city of Issaquah. And these signs are supposed to be timeless. They're supposed to last generations because this is a huge financial investment for the city. But also if the city logo changes, how are we going to do that? And how do we integrate art and make this Issaquah while still making it timeless? So there's a lot of things that we need to balance as preferences. Like we said, design is an iterative process. But here you can see we have some different facility signage. And then maybe a smaller sign for up on the pool, but also directional, being there's alternate entrances to some of the parking lots. We also have our trailhead signage, trail recreational directional signage, and then more of a bollard system with universal symbology that might be more found on the Rainier Trail. And again, some park signage. So right now what we're doing is like I said, we just met with the steering group last week. We had heard some of their concerns. We're also going to be, we met with city staff, and we're here tonight with you. And we're really going to be taking the feedback received and modifying the designs. But our goal is to start working towards a finalized design. As I mentioned, sign design and art is an iterative process. And so we're going to be doing this until we feel we get it right. We will then share it with the final concept with the public when we feel we have it getting right. And we'll create a final wayfinding and signage master plan. We will also produce some prototypes to make sure the materials are good. One thing I haven't really talked about is some of these signs are going to be lit, like the gateway signs, the vertical gateway signs, and a few of our building signs may also be lit. So how are the materials we using going to respond to light, and how could light potentially change some of these elements as well? So there's a third dimension. And as we start producing prototypes, you know, we all have different screens, we all have different monitors, things look flat until things get produced and are real, and you can work with a production team to dial those in. What I see on my phone versus my computer may be different than what your computer reads or looks like. So we'll be really dialing in those colors, textures within the reproduction to make sure we're getting this just right. And then once we've done this, we'll eventually update City Council. There's no plan yet as to when that will occur. Again, we want to make sure we get the design right. And then with City Council, we will discuss what the phased implementation plan is. There is in the proposed or the adopted 22 to 26 capital budget right now, we have a proposed budget of $200,000 per year. But again, we'll have to wait and see if that gets funded through the budget process at this time. So with that, I can take any questions, or I also have some photo simulations to show you how some of those other sign types didn't really read well in the environment. And so I can show you how some of the proposed signs look.
Ruben, see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, given you talked about the investment of the signs and how long they might last, what would be the materials of the sign?
Great question. We're looking at using some steel on some of the more gateway signs, but some of the other signs we're looking at doing like a vinyl wrap, much like that is done right now on some of the utility boxes with that wrap. It's vandal resistant, it's economical, it lasts long, it's UV resistant, very easy for maintenance. So we're looking at a combination of different things depending upon the environment, but vinyl overlay would be a lot of the signage.
Thank you.
But then some of the, just to add into that, to add depth and dimension, we have talked about separating some of the panels with little risers, like at City Hall, to, you know, it looks very flat right now, but it might have a little depth and dimension. Jeff, did you have something to say?
No, I was just scratching my beard.
Oh, I do have some photo simulations if the board would like to see how some of those other sign types looked in the environment. I'm happy to show those if it would.
Jen, if you don't mind, maybe as you transition to sharing, I can give a little bit of overview well as some of my observations. So having sat in on the steering committee meeting on Thursday, yeah, it was really helpful to get their feedback and thoughts on composition and content. As Jen said, color was a really, really important topic and something that I think resonated with the steering committee that I think was really important is that the core tin color didn't feel quite right. That though there was support in sort of reflecting the hillsides, the Alps of Issaquah, we need to try and find a color that works a little bit better. So it's that kind of feedback that's really, really helpful and helpful with any observations you might have tonight as well. I think Jennifer is scheduling some time with the Art Commission to have a similar conversation, Transportation Advisory Board. So again,
Yes.
I just can't emphasize enough the iterative nature of this and really getting multiple perspectives from residents, both in feedback online, but also from our boards and commissions, to really land on something that feels like it reflects Issaquah. Part of this effort and boy, I know this desire existed even, more than 5 years ago when I arrived. I think one of our goals to this effort too is if we're able to create a standard for our trailheads, our parks, our city facilities, in a way, the goal is to declutter some of the signage that exists around town. We have multiple different varieties of types of city signs and public signs. So this would be something as it's implemented that in a way sort of not only standardizes but simplifies city sort of public signage to city facilities over time. So with that, Jen, take it away.
Yep. And thank you for that, Jeff. I'm planning on going to the Arts Commission on the 13th, still working on scheduling the tab, and then, we'll definitely reconvene with the steering group again until we get this right. So with that, I'm going to whoops. Hold on, I'm sharing the wrong screen. Hold on.
Can I see any hands from anybody here to make comments or questions before we move? Danielle? Go ahead, Danielle.
Yeah, thanks. A couple comments. One is I think that I like the current rendition of the signs a lot better than the 4 options that were 6 options or whatever it was before. So I think that we're making good progress. I do agree that to me those hillsides or the Alps should be green. It just seems like it would speak more to Issaquah's character. So I'm glad that you're hearing that comment as well. And then I have a question with respect to kind of making things simple for people to see. I noticed that on one of the signs that you showed, it had perhaps some like visual images about what was maybe on that trail, or we flipped through it pretty quickly, but I was wondering if there's a thought as to add images as to what's in a park, like for example, like a restroom or a picnic shelter, like that type of stuff.
Yeah, so for a lot of the directional trails, we'll be identifying, whether or not you can take a horse on it, can you do a bike, and some of those things. And in our parks, like Confluence Park, prime example, we could put one of those trail bollards out there and with a directional sign, restroom going this way, so people would know where those are going. We'd be using universal icons for that. So yeah, most definitely. It helps simplify and guide people.
So yeah, so great. I love that idea. And then I also, I have mentioned this a few times, but I think that before, and I know this is a long-term project, but before we actually have the signs, I think we really need to look at our naming convention again at our current parks, because I think that if we have a more standard naming convention, that also will help identify and simplify kind of for people, what type of park they're encountering, whether it's just a space to sit or it's a trailhead or whether it's an active recreation park or playground, neighborhood park. So just going to put that plug in again.
Great point. And we've had that discussion internally as well. Chris?
Is that it, Danielle? Yeah. Chris? I think I saw your hand, Chris.
Yep. And so in looking at these, you can see how the core 10 coloration is attractive but not representative, and contrasting with backgrounds, but it's still not representative. Looks more like Sedona or something like that. And then, but then if you look at the greens, natural color greens, it lost a little bit. So I was wondering if maybe there's a chance to do almost like a core 10 shadow element behind it, help draw your eye to it, but then stick with the representative dark greens.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. I'm going to quick walk through these photo simulations so you can see why there's elements of the green sign that were really drawn out and are represented in the final concept, but you can see how they really aren't showing up well in our landscape. So here's some monument and gateway signage and some vertical gateway signage along city entrances and regional trails. here in the parks and at Julius Bohm Pool, it really just gets lost with our surrounding environment.
Good.
And we really need these to be seen to help provide, vehicles with direction. So these are some of the things that the steering committee was working with. Sign concept 2, it reads a little better in the environment, which is likely why it received a favorable color process. But again, people weren't recognizing, really relating to Mount Rainier. And 2, we're also not wanting to look like the Issaquah Alps Trails Club logo either. We as a city need to be independent, have our own image, and though their logo is great, very wonderful, we just need something different for the city itself. We get a lot of legibility on these darker signs for directional purposes, but again, the rest doesn't really do terribly much for those. Again, the sign concept 3 really resonated with folks, but there's a lot of concern again about legibility, but knowing these gateway signs were lit, they don't really do much in some of these other situations. And understandable, these could be various materials, have different element of shine or glisten to them that would make them stand out more. But overall, you can just tell, good way to see how legible something is to squint at it. And if you squint at it and it disappears, then it's not very legible. And then sign concept 4 had quite a bit of visibility when this got a nice favorable color combination response, but people didn't really get this topography and waterways concept. So I think it didn't really hit home with a lot of folks. But you can see how the blue becomes a little more legible within the landscape. The letters pop a little bit more, as well as the Core-10, as you were just mentioning, Chris, having that as an accent rather than more of a main theme may be a way to go. One thing we are considering doing as part of these signs, and you can see here is these directional signs, is carrying the color down the post to let you know, hey, this is a city informational sign. And then here are some of the proposed designs, photo sims, so you can see how these would relate in the actual environment as well. And like the Julius Bohm Pool one, that would have lighting on it just due to the hours up on the building itself. So you can see how these read in the natural environment a little bit. The blue definitely stands out against the green on this vertical gateway. Having the brown kind of offsets with the vegetation at the bottom. So a lot of design elements and characteristics. And so all of your feedback is really helpful in helping us hone this in. I think one question I have to the board is, do you feel like, colors aside, do you feel like the trees and the hills and the shape, how does that sit with you?
Well, I'll speak in the sense that certainly I don't see the color being appropriate. I've mentioned that. I mean, it's too southwest oriented, and I understand the green is a challenge. It may have something to do with bordering or some way of dealing with that so that the entire sign is not green like some of those earlier ones. To me, I like the silhouette of the Alps. I think that that's a great representation. The silhouette of the trees at the base is fine, but the problem from my perspective is the hills look barren, again, almost like Southwest. So if there's a way of introducing some silhouette of forested hills rather than plain, more barren hills, I think that would be a greater representation of Issaquah. Mm-hmm. The challenge, frankly, I do like the color combination artfully. The problem is I don't think it's a good representation of the city. and that's the challenge, to get accurate. And I'm not sure just yet, the best way of doing that, but I think it's getting closer with the colors. I do have a little bit of challenge with some of the blue. I know that we're kind of heading in that direction a little bit for visibility, but blue has an awful lot of different shades to it, and it's really a matter of zeroing in what the best shade is going to be, and we need to make sure it's not looking like Walmart. That would be my
Agreed.
We need to.
But this.
Yeah, and so, because I remember the amount of feedback we had with Atlas Apartments, and a lot of objections when that went in, and we just need to be careful that we don't have that kind of thing going on.
Yeah, actually blue is one of the colors in the city's style guide. We have like a taupey color, an orangey color, this blue, and a brighter green, which is almost too bright that it's trendy. That if we're trying to look at signage, would not last 20, 30, 40 years, which is really what we're striving for, is to find that right color that is representative of Issaquah, that meets our currently branded style guide, but also pushes the envelope for the future and becomes that timeless element that we need in the system, because this is going to take many, many years to implement, and it's a big lift, and we definitely want to make sure we're getting it right.
So it's a great comment about shades of blue, Brad. I think, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, in this case, this shade of blue is the one for our style guide. If you went to our city webpage and scrolled down, there's some kind of fun art with topography art with the silhouettes of the Alps. That's in the same shade of blue on our webpage. So there is some continuity. This blue is reflected elsewhere in city communications and signage.
Yeah.
And Jen, could you talk a little bit about, I know there was a lot of discussion earlier on about wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
Our old emblem was, a salmon. We had talked about that, and could you talk about why wildlife is no longer kind of a part of it?
Again, part of some of the reason, as we were looking at comments, there were things about, oh yes, the fish, but no, the fish, and it's our logo, and should the logo change? And we also, as we look let me go back to this other screen here.
Not necessarily should the logo change, Jen, but if the logo changes.
If the logo changes, yes, because
yeah, this one looks. Yeah.
It happens all the time. But as we look, so we substituted the trees as part of that artful element, as well as somewhat of the composition, knowing that it is the intent. If you look at these directional signs over on the left-hand side of the screen, there's this little shape at the top. We hope to work eventually with an artist to help work with the community and the different neighborhoods to be able to put a neighborhood symbol or sign up there. And we felt that there might be opportunities within the various neighborhoods to come up with their own creative concept. And if by not putting it on the sign, it left that for particular neighborhoods perhaps to come up with their own, like the Creative Arts District can put their logo up here as well. We are going to be putting a small emblem on some of these signs that say City of Issaquah down here. That's going to have the fish on here. So it is going to be there, but just not as a massive piece like before, because there were some people that were relating to it, some that weren't. And so we really are trying to just hit everybody in this design. So.
Other comments from the board? I'm not seeing everybody, so it's hard for me to know if somebody has to add or wants to add something. Ruben, you got something?
Yeah, Brad, you mentioned the one design you didn't care for because it didn't show like trees in the hills. But when I look at these signs, I see the ridges have some kind of a texture to them that indicates trees to me. Maybe we're looking at two different signs. I can't tell.
No, I think it's just in some respects it just may be washed out by the coloring to some extent.
See, this one I see the rough edge, which to me
Right.
indicates sort of a forest type.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what this does. The kind of the tiered faded color on there, it does have that kind of spiky top.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Ruben, how we interpreted both Brad's comment, and again, it came up with some other steering committee members, is how do we emphasize that these are forested hillsides? You know, how do we make sure that in whatever sign type it is, it really reflects, we're not just celebrating hill silhouettes of hills, but these are, you know, it's forested hillsides that is so much of what Issaquah is about.
And how can we possibly integrate, you know, the Green Issaquah initiative into this focus somehow without washing out the color of green? You know, because that is a problem that we had with it. But to not have any green is, although I see the trees in the bottom there look like they may have a little bit of a texture of that or color of that. So I mean, I think that's, you know, I think it's heading in the right direction with color or some additional silhouetting.
What's hard too, Brad, is, you know, when you look at mountains and you look at a series of mountains, they actually get kind of grayish blue, purple fade out. When they're dark green like that, they get this like, and that doesn't really reflect well,
Right.
also graphically on this. And so,
Right.
you know, try and make it look like it really looks, it, you get that legibility thing coming in too. So it's been a fun process to play with, I have to say.
Other comments or questions from the board on this? I know we're still got several steps yet to go on this. And for clarification on timeline, did I understand you're planning to have the plan done by the end of the year?
It's our goal, yes. But you know, if we need more time to dial this in, we'll definitely take what time's needed. So, you know, we're at a really critical point right now to finalize these designs. I mean, hearing that everyone's relatively happy with the hillsides and the trees and the shape, you know, that's a lot of the design right there. So I think we're getting close. And so yes, we'll definitely come back to you and come back to the steering committee before we take this out to the public for comment.
And I saw a note from Melissa. Danielle, you had something further to add? Danielle? Danielle?
No, no, that was my hand was raised from earlier.
Okay, okay. Any other comments from the board? Brenda, I see your hand up.
Can't hear you.
Melissa, are you able to unmute her?
I just did.
Oh, thank you. What I was noticing of the signs, I really don't like the brown hills. That does look very southwestern to me. But when I look at the perpendicular signs, they show a very nice silhouette of trees, and I can see mountains in the background that appear to have trees on them. So it looks more Issaquah. This other looks like foothills of the desert.
Right.
Well, I'd like to hear that we're having consistent comments, so that's really good, and they're not all over the place. So thank you. That's good feedback.
And I didn't know if Connie was still with us and had any comment or not. I think she may have had some input, but I don't know if she's even still with us. Not hearing anything.
Well, they wouldn't let me yet.
Okay, there you are. We hear you. Go ahead.
You have to unmute me. So we went to the effort of looking at the national park signs, right? And so what we noticed with the national park signs is that the trees are much larger in the foreground. And so part of this is we don't really experience Issaquah this far away. The trees are very close and the hills are a little distant. And so part of it is that perspective. And then, of course, if you border it in white, you're going to see the green pop. If you border it in a different color and the green is on the inside, then you will still see the green. It's only when you have the green be the whole sign. And that's what the other one was. And so if you've ever tried to make campaign signs in Issaquah, you soon learn the tricks of how to make things visible from a car. Now, having spoken to many people when I had my store about getting lost in Issaquah, this does not address people being lost in Issaquah, and I was interested to hear that part of the definition of success was getting people to businesses, for example. This doesn't seem to do that at all. So I'm not exactly sure how this plan is meeting its definition of success. This seems to be only getting people to city-owned items and saying, welcome to Issaquah. And so for me, people are confused. They don't know whether they're on the north side of the freeway, the south side of the freeway. They don't know what the zero out street is going east and west. And our signage gives them no guidance in figuring out how to negotiate Issaquah unless we live here and we just know. But so many of the people are coming off of I-90. They've never been here before, or maybe they were here once 5 years ago, and they have no idea where they are. And so then they just go because they can't find what they thought they knew. And so I don't see that that solves that enormous tourism problem, which was one of the reasons that we had this whole sign initiative 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, same conversation. So I think that this conversation needs to be expanded again to something larger, to how to have a successful sign system in Issaquah that serves all those purposes. So I don't see that this does that. Now, again, y'all are the Parks Board, so it makes sense to have this conversation be about how to get to municipally owned items. But you left me that opening with your introduction, so I took it. And there you go. So I agree with what everybody else said, and I hope to see changes rather than just going with what you proposed. And the other thing I didn't understand is what the budget is, how much you've spent, how much more you have to spend, how much you're going to ask the city council to understand how many signs one might get in a fiscal budget year. Because the reality of how long this is going to take is a huge thing. And I want to see the money, and we're just working on making a budget right now. And so if the Parks Department wanted to do an ask, then they would know what to ask for, and they could get behind doing some budget asks, which you guys need to do this year. Oh, I'm off topic again. So I'm going to hang up.
Okay, thank you, Connie, for your input. We'll consider those items. Jeff, did I see you have a hand up?
Yeah, I'm looking at the clock though, and want to respect that clock. I can follow up with Connie on those points.
Okay.
So
I think that's it. That's a good enough time for a wrap on that. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for giving us an update, and the board will hear more as we fine tune this along the way here. So stay tuned.
Appreciate everybody's feedback, Brad. Thanks for that.
So on to reports, and we'll make it quick. I'm up first here on reports, and I have a couple things, and I'll just touch upon them. We had talked about maybe having meetings in person next month. That isn't going to happen. COVID has arrived once again here, and so we're going to have to probably stay virtual for the next few months. Maybe November, we'll see. But for now, we're going to be staying virtual. We didn't really utilize this tonight, but in part because I kind of wanted to talk about it first. Jeff and I talked a little bit about introducing a new alert system to each agenda item. As you have seen, some of the agenda items, Blackberry and Wayfinding, had a D/A to them. We're going to kind of refresh things a little bit to the point where when we see DA, that means that we're still in the process of moving things along, and the discussion is about that. And the A is kind of a board giving somewhat element of support for, you know, a step-by-step process, so that we're not just getting to the end and having, you know, one action item and that's it. We can maybe have a few action items along the path of the process, and it's good for the board to kind of step forward to say, yeah, we agree with the process and that it's moving in the right direction or something along those lines. So just be on the lookout. In the future, we'll maybe add some more action items for our discussions, you know, to show the support from the board on whatever item that we might be talking about. So I wanted to just clarify that. Real quick, I attended a Kokanee work group meeting on July 28th. It was a quarterly meeting. Things that really apply here in Issaquah is Herrera is currently going through a design process of Laughing Jacobs Creek. There's a restoration process underway with Tibbetts Creek between Trout Unlimited and the Snoqualmie Tribe. There is, can't even read my notes here at this point. Oh, there's aquatic weed control going on in Lake Sammamish, a pretty substantial effort of partly studying the impact of aquatic weeds on the impact of the lake. So a good bit is happening with that by Trout Unlimited as well. And the last part of that from the Kokanee group was we talked about the UWRP Urban Wildlife Refuge Partnership. It's getting much closer to getting some visualization for the community. There was a 2-year funding effort. They're very close now to having that completed. And once that's now done, you'll be hearing a lot more from UWRP. They're already showing themselves a good bit now on Facebook. I also attended the Climate Action Plan on July 28th. Won't get into any details. The only thing I wanted to say is there's going to be a next quarterly or next meeting in October. The intention is to have a draft of that plan by December so that can then move forward next year. Last item that I wanted to talk about is a task force that that the city is putting together for basically the capital improvement funding efforts moving forward. And so there's going to be a 3-month process from September through December where this task force from all various different departments and boards and commissions are going to start talking about some other efforts to get funding implemented. And so I'm going to represent the board with this task force that will be meeting a couple times a month through the end of the year. But I wanted to introduce a subcommittee essentially with the board to get a little bit more feedback from the board rather than just me talking in this task force, of actually getting some additional support and ideas from the board itself. And so I would like to get a subcommittee put together, and I'm asking for volunteers to do that. We'll talk separately in terms of what that might mean. As I foresee it, it's really going to just be sharing the information as it comes available so that you can at least see it and provide some input to me. And the subcommittee, we can decide on what meetings and how many. I don't see a lot of meetings, quite frankly. I just want to have some other people within the board engaged in this process so that we can actually have, more of a collective effort to some extent in terms of what information that we provide to the task force. So with that being said, is there anybody that would like to volunteer for a subcommittee for this task
I'd
force.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Danielle. I was hopefully looking forward to that.
Yep, I'm looking forward to that. It's
Good.
been a long time coming, so
Yes, I know.
pretty exciting project.
Yes. Anybody else on the board like to join us for this effort?
I'll join you.
Ruben? Thank you, Ruben. Anyone else? Going once? We have a small group, which is fine. Going once, going twice. Okay. Thank you, Ruben, Danielle, and Zach. I see stepped in here. I appreciate that, Zach. We got 3, and I think that between the 4 of us, that makes a really nice subcommittee. And I'll get back to all 4 of you here as we get closer to getting more information from the city as this task force gets put together. But thank you for that, and we'll talk further. Ryan, you're up next. Sorry to kind of shorten the time a little bit, but we always look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Brad. Jennifer, I just want to give props to you on the sensory play at Blackberry Park. From my experience as a camp counselor, especially the 5-year-olds, they really love to touch things while they were at camp after spending so long indoors. So I really love to see the inclusion of that in the plan. So great job with that. And in terms of the Youth Advisory Board's work, we don't meet in the summer, so we haven't done anything since the last meeting. But in terms of stuff going on this week, we have a meeting with Jeff on Wednesday, which we're all very excited about, to sort of talk about the structure of the board, our mission statement, and sort of see how we want to move with that going forward. The board's been around, I think this is our 26th year of the Youth Advisory Board, and so sort of reevaluating how we did during the pandemic and what our life was like before that, and seeing if we want to sort of merge those 2 models we use together. And also just get to know each other, since this is the first time with some of our new members. And then we also have a meeting with the Human Services Department on Thursday to go over their strategic plan, since they wanted some youth input on that. And that is all I have for the Youth Advisory Board.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Appreciate it. All your help. So, Jeff, it looks like you're wrapping us up here for the evening. And
I will wrap it up quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Ryan, hey, I'm looking forward to sitting down with the Youth Advisory Board too. It's going to be fun. And Brad, thanks for highlighting that capital funding, long-range capital funding task force group, and for stepping up and representing the board and the rest of you board members. Having a subgroup to lend support, and that'll be, I think, really, really helpful. So great to see that taking shape. As Brad said, we're going to be back to virtual for a while. It was sure nice seeing you all at Hillside Park and meeting with our neighbors. I honestly really like that format, and I hope that maybe in future summers, maybe as opposed to taking tours of multiple parks, let's go visit our neighborhoods and get out to the community. That could be a really fun format. So I'd love to brainstorm that as we move forward. With us going back to virtual, yeah, and our goals is really doing our part in getting rid of the Delta variant. And with the state mask mandate, our recreation facilities as of today are back to masks required while you're inside the community center or senior center or Pickering Barn, and all of our programs and services that go with that. We want to continue, and we're ready to certainly adapt our programs as needed to make sure there's safe spaces for our residents. Our last summer concert of the season, it's hard to believe, our 8th concert is tomorrow night. I'll be there to give a big thank you to the audience. They've been extremely well intended. Also with guidance, and I'll say this, this is going to be recorded, so no one's seeing this live, but if you're planning on attending, please bring a mask. I'm going to encourage all the audience, as the state has done for outdoor events and outdoor concerts. Let's mask up and try and be smart and enjoy the concert, but certainly protect ourselves and protect one another. Last item I have is we reopened Central Park Pad 3 in our turf replacement project late last week. Jennifer, great job on that project. Kirsten and the park operations team were really instrumental in giving us feedback on that. you all were instrumental in that. So a shout out to Brad and I wanting to have this D/A model. I think the turf conversation, if you recall that earlier this year, was a great example of that, really giving you an opportunity to give us advisory action items. But the discussion we had to really pivot away from crumb rubber, we now have opened up Central Park Pad 3 with a pure organic, 100% organic infill with cork and sand. It's going to be real exciting to see what kind of feedback we get from the users. Please go up and walk on it. I think you'll be surprised in a couple of points. It's much cooler, and it doesn't smell like Les Schwab tires as you're walking on the field as well. So again, I think just a great example of providing great amenities for the community, but also doing it in a much more environmentally friendly way. So just again, thanks for your feedback and helping to inform that project, and exciting to get it open for the community. That's it.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. Anybody have any announcements or other business they wanted to bring up? Not seeing any. We ran a few minutes over. Thanks for joining us this evening and hanging in there. And so we'll do it again next month. And a reminder that something will come out shortly about the September 9th special meeting with PPC. Appreciate everybody that can join us on that. Would be helpful. So with that, I appreciate everything, and meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.